When you have your girls, you're never alone. You get together for coffee, maybe to work out, or just to laugh. We created Hey Girl just for you. Can't wait for you to join us.
Hey everybody, welcome to Hey Girl. I'm your girl Kim with an E, and this is episode 106. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, I want to let you know that Hey Girl is a safe space where you can share your experiences and be affirmed. Let's face it, life can be complex and sometimes overwhelming. That's why we believe in the power of conversation, because knowing you're not alone is what will help you get through. And I'm so glad you're here today. You are not alone, so come on in the room, say hello in the comments and let us know that you are here and tell us where you're joining us from. Even if you're watching this in the replay, it really helps us out if Facebook can see this engagement with the live video. So definitely come in, say hello, tell us where you're joining from, and let's get into this very important conversation. As you know, this month is mental health awareness, and we are right here at the end of the month. But I did not want to let the month go by without addressing this very important topic. So stay tuned for our guest today, who's going to bring us some really good information and support for those of you out there who are either dealing with mental illness or know someone who is. Before we get into that, though, I just want to remind you to subscribe to our newsletter, our monthly newsletter. You can go to the website, justkim.net, sign up for the newsletter, join the sisterhood. There, I will continue to engage with you each week with encouraging words and notes and downloadables that you might find helpful and useful. We have a Hey Girl Planner page and the monthly calendar that you can download to your desktop. So we'd love for you to be a part of the Hey Girl family and join the sisterhood. Also, want to remind you to like, follow, and share, of course, this live, this page, and then also know that we are on YouTube as well. And so, for those of you or your friends who maybe are not on Facebook, if you are on YouTube, you can find our replays there on the YouTube channel. So go ahead and like and subscribe to the YouTube as well, and go back and look at some of those previous episodes. We've had some really great conversations over the last 2 years. Unbelievable that it has been that long, but definitely check it out. So yeah, as I mentioned, this month is National Mental Health Awareness Month, and this is a very important topic. I mentioned last week that we would spend some time with it, even in the episodes that are coming up. But today we're going to try to at least start the conversation. And I want to let you know that there is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, rather, which is a website you might want to go to. It's found at www.nami.org. And you can find out more about the organization and this topic of mental health, and hear the stories or read the stories of those who have dealt with various challenges around mental health. And I think it'll be really helpful for you to sort of understand this topic in a little bit deeper way, which is also why I'm super excited to have my guest today, who is a professional in this area, and her name is Pinkie Fitts. She's had over 30 years of experience in the nursing profession, with the last 6 years as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. She has a passion for those struggling with mental illness and desires to see the stigma attached to mental health eradicated. First and foremost, she loves the Lord with all her heart. And secondly, she loves her husband, Michael, of 34 years. She also has a son, Marcus, and three grandchildren, McKinley, Michael, and Sonia. And her favorite scripture comes from Jeremiah 32:27, and it says, "Behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me?" Indeed. Thank you, Pinkie, for being here. Welcome to Hey Girl.
Hey girl, hey.
Hey
How are
girl.
you? Hey
I
there, how
am
are you?
great. Oh, I'm so good. I'm so glad you're here.
It's good to
Um,
be here.
Yeah. And wow, 34 years. Good for you. Of marriage. That's fantastic. How does it
Absolutely.
feel to have three grandchildren on top of that?
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's the club. That's the club that other put people put you in. You don't get to join that on your own. Other people put you in that
Right.
club. So it was a little interesting at first, but now I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I would not. I
I
love
I definitely understand. Yeah, you're right. You don't have a say in that one.
it. No,
It
at
just
all. At
happens.
all. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. Good stuff. We were talking about how time flies. Kids
Yeah.
grow up, and move
Yes.
out and start their own lives. It's crazy how fast that happens.
It does.
And you and I have a mutual friend and, for me, cousin in Lisa James. And
Absolutely.
we have known each other for years through her.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
and I didn't even realize, I didn't even ever know what you did for a living until recently. So that's funny. um,
Interesting.
I know. I guess we just never really talked about that.
No,
But
usually when I'm around you, we were trying to get food or trying to get something
right.
done or yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, more important things. More important things.
More important things.
Just kidding.
Absolutely.
But I'm very glad to have this conversation with you because it is such an important one, and I'm really interested in knowing what you know from your work in this field. And I think it's really going to be helpful for the ladies who will be watching, the audience who comes to this program to get some insight as well. Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings around this topic, and I really, really want you to help us kind of get a better understanding than we perhaps have now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but before we get into that, let's just talk about the fact that you didn't start out doing psychiatric nursing, or you didn't start out being a psychiatric nurse practitioner. You were a nurse, and so talk about how what you kind of entered this field thinking about, as far as what you wanted to do, and then how and why did you make that transition?
Absolutely. It's interesting. As a child, I thought that I wanted to be a psychologist. But by the
Mm.
time I got to high school and life changes and everything, nursing became it. I come from a family of nurses, so nursing was just it. And so I went into nursing, but even in nursing school, when most nurses struggled when it came to the psych portion of nursing, I aced it. And
Mm.
they were, and most nurses were really struggling in that area, failing tests and everything. And I would go to the board and they said, somebody made 100. I was like, oh my God, they did. And it would be me. So, and I've always kind of like done PRN work in psychiatry, but
Okay.
never anything full time. And so after the death of my oldest son in 2009, I found myself returning to Alabama, and
Mm.
as I returned to Alabama, I just wanted to just take a break. And so I had a friend in Virginia, Lisa McPherson, who has group homes. So I said, well, let me just go to the mental health center and learn about group homes. And so I went there, and the lady said, well, what's your background? I said, nursing. And she said, wonderful. Would you be interested in doing PRN?
Mm.
Sure. Well, long story
Okay, so
short,
pause. Tell us what a PRN is.
oh, I'm sorry. PRN means as needed. So you're a nurse, and this is
Okay.
a facility. And when they need someone, they can call and say, hey, can you come in and cover while this person's on vacation? Or can you
Okay.
come in? Everybody's out sick today. So I said,
Okay.
okay. So I go in for training. I train with one nurse, then I go and I train with another nurse. And the next day, the nurse that I trained with the previous day had a heart attack. So I became her for the next 3 months. So PRN was out the window. And from that, I realized that this was my area, that I absolutely loved psychiatry. And in my mind, why wasn't I ever doing this full time? So God brings
Wow.
things about in a way that will really blow our mind. And so within 6 months of starting to work there, they offered me a position. I said, no, I'm just going to do PRN. By 9 months, I was the nurse manager and went on to work and just loved it. And then at the point where we began to have doctors, one retired, fine, another one left early, and this was at the Community Mental Health Center in Huntsville, which is called Wellstone now. They've changed the name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to wonder, and they would always encourage, especially I was a doctor there, Dr. Yedla, and she would always say, you need to go back to school. And so I
Mm.
found myself desiring to help in a different capacity. So I
Mm.
became a nurse manager there. Then I went back to school and ended up becoming a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner.
Wow. So God really just kind of
He
pushed you in
did.
that direction.
He
That's what I'm
did.
hearing.
He did. He did.
Yeah. And so talk to me then, because yeah, I can imagine that people would kind of shy away from working in this area. Talk to me about what it was that drew you to this area rather than repelled you.
Exactly. And I need to add in something too. When we talk about the way God orchestrate things, I as a since fourth grade, my very best friend has two sisters that are schizophrenic. And at the time I didn't understand, but being around her forced me to be around them. And
Mm,
I was around them and I began to learn things from them. I could tell when they talked to me and engaged
mm,
me in conversation, they were fine. When I would come over and they wouldn't talk to me, they wouldn't look at me, the next
mm,
couple of weeks, they would be in the hospital. So these were things I
mm.
learned about. And a lot of times, Kim, we fear what we don't understand.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people fear people with mental illness because they don't understand it. And media
Mm,
has not helped in this area because it
mm-hmm.
often portrays the person with mental illness as someone that is just erratic, someone that is
Yeah.
impulsive and just doing all kinds of things, and someone that you should fear according to
Yeah.
media. But in reality, the people with mental illness are they're just like everybody else. That's their
Mm,
diagnosis is not who they are. So we will often say, oh, she's bipolar or he's
mm-hmm.
schizophrenic, but the idea is the same as someone with cancer. If someone
Mm.
developed cancer, we don't say, oh, she's cancer or he's cancer. That's the
Oh,
condition that they have. So when we talk
wow.
about people with mental illness, we make their mental illness the person,
Their
but it's
identity.
not.
Mercy.
It's not.
That is
That
so true.
disability
Yeah.
is just the condition that they had, that they've developed over the course of heredity or
Hmm.
circumstance, whatever brings them to this place. So that's where they are. And so we don't understand fully what it
Yeah.
is to have these illnesses. And so people with mental illness suffer because we
Right.
don't understand.
Yeah. And it is unnerving and a little scary for
Yeah,
us when we encounter someone that we perceive as having a mental illness. And I guess that's part of it too, because we don't understand and we don't know what to expect. We think they might be dangerous or we're not
exactly.
sure if they are or not. And so yeah, and you're right. I think that we really should be careful about the language that we use in how we talk about people who have this illness. We even make offhand remarks about the weather being schizophrenic, right? Like
Yes,
we just
yes.
use some of those kinds of sort of offhand remarks and not without recognizing, the weight of those words. I know I've been guilty of that. Um,
We all have. We all have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then bipolar is one that we throw around like,
Oh
all
wow,
the
we
time about
throw
everything. Everything is bipolar. Yeah. We use that term to,
exactly. And
for
when I hear
all
that in my
kinds.
mind, I'm like, oh, that is so not bipolar.
That is not, yes.
So
So
yeah.
I want to talk about that. So let's talk about, first of all, what would you say, in your experience at least, are the most common mental illnesses that you've encountered that patients suffer from? Which would you say is the most common?
The most common is depression.
Mm-hmm.
Depression is, and there are different degrees of depression. There can be depression that we have after the death of a loved one, or after a loss of a
Mm-hmm.
job, or marital issues, or those things. Or we can have depression to the point where it's difficult to get out of bed. Everything's going great, but
Mm.
that depression is still there. So depression is probably the most common. It
Mm-hmm.
depends on the level of care that you provide. In the community mental health center, when I worked there, I saw a lot of schizophrenia, a lot of bipolar disorder, a lot of dissociative diseases,
Mm-hmm.
disorders as well. In private practice, I see more of depression, anxiety, which is huge. Anxiety is huge.
Mm-hmm.
As well as schizophrenia and other things as well. So
Yeah.
some narcissistic behaviors, all kinds of things. There are a whole gamut of
Mm-hmm.
things that you see.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's break these down a little bit because we've all heard these terms thrown about, and I don't know that we necessarily understand them in the way that we should. So we're talking about understanding. Let's begin
So
with depression since you started with that one. And I know that there is a difference between that sadness that comes as a result of a loss or some, devastating experience, and the kind of depression that seems to be unreasonable, if you will, because it's not really connected to anything particular. Would you say that that is the type of depression that needs to be treated, the one that's disconnected from experience, or might either of them be the kind of depression that would need intervention?
correct. Very, very good question. Depression in and of itself, like you say, we talked about it briefly just a minute ago, has so many different degrees of depression. But I am a firm believer, Kim, that every person needs a therapist.
Mm,
Everyone.
yeah.
Not all depression requires medication, or
Mm,
but I feel that we need to be able to talk about what's going on so that we can better help ourselves to get past it. Sometimes when we just keep things to ourselves, have you ever been in a meeting, Kim, where that we're talking about things we're going to do, blah 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 blah, and then you have a thought in your head, and it sounds really really good, and the moment you share it with the group, you yourself can say, "No, that wouldn't work because of X, Y, Z."
yeah.
But in
Yeah.
your head, it made a
Yeah.
whole lot of sense. This is the
Yeah.
answer to our problem. But once you were able to verbalize that, then it
Hmm.
became apparent to you that, oh, that would not work. So the
Right.
same concept
Yeah.
with that depression and what we're going through, sometimes our mind can create, my mind can create a scenario that is not even realistic, but I
Mm.
can go on and feel sad and depressed and really just have a hard time with that thought that if I were to
Mhm.
share it with someone else, they could help me realize this is really not reality. What are
What
the
you
odds of
think.
this
Yeah.
happening? So I feel that
Right.
everyone needs to have a therapist. Now we're going to talk about the level
Mhm.
of therapy. Not everybody needs, and it would not hurt, don't get me wrong, it would not hurt if everybody has a professional therapist. But what you're doing
Mhm.
here with Hey Girl and talking to friends and having an outlet where you can really express what's going on is very helpful, is very therapeutic in dealing with
Mhm.
life in and of itself. And when we talk about mental health, we're talking about those psychological changes as well as the emotional aspect of life that happens just
Mhm.
with life.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
can't determine when we look in Texas that at that point, what
Mm.
happened the other day, they need professional intervention to get
Yeah.
through this. The children that, if any children were left alive in that room, they need intensive
Oh.
therapy because they will never be the same. The parents,
Mhm.
they need intensive therapy because they've been
Yeah.
through it. Even the first responders, the nurses at the hospital, even the surgeons,
Mm.
all of these people need intervention, but
Yeah.
some of them will and some won't. And it will
Right.
actually show up later in life, what we don't deal with.
Ooh. Yeah. I think that's everything right there. That's everything
Yes,
because if we're all getting regular checkups, therapy, that sort of thing, then you're in the care of someone who can recognize when you
absolutely.
need more help, maybe than just the conversation and just the kind of
That's
regular
right.
check-ins. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I am a firm believer in getting therapy and we've talked about that
Absolutely.
on the show before, just to get the sort of tools for dealing with everyday life. Because whether you're dealing with
Yes.
an enormous traumatic event or just the day-to-day struggles, you're right. I think that was a perfect analogy, Pinky, by the way. The whole, when you have an idea in your head and it's perfect and
Yeah,
then you say it out loud and you're like, oh no. Yeah, that's a
that's
really,
it.
really good analogy. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so depression, got it. Another one that we just talked about is bipolar. So we talk about people being bipolar and the weather is bipolar and the situation is bipolar. But obviously, we
Yes,
are
yes.
misusing that word, abusing the
We're
word. So let's talk
definitely
about
misusing it.
what what actually is bipolar disorder and what does it look like typically? And I know
Okay.
there's I know that's kind of a difficult question because it manifests differently in every individual, but just in general, what exactly is bipolar disorder?
So when we talk about bipolar, we're going to start with the bi. And that just
Okay.
means two. So we got two sides. We have a upside, which is the manic side, and then we have the downside, which is the depressive side. And so when you have the manic side, that's when you have and a lot of these things can overlap as well because you can have
Mm,
depression without having bipolar disorder. And but if you have those manic episodes, that's what tells us. So you'll have somebody that will get paid and they will just go and just buy everything they think they want, things they don't even need. They're just spending money they don't have, doing all of these things because they feel good and they
mm-hmm,
feel like, okay, life is good, but not even considering the mortgage hadn't been paid,
mm,
the the light bill hasn't been paid, the kids have no food. They're just
mm,
spending because they're just going
mm-hmm,
on. You'll have a person with manic behavior that will decide today is a good day to quit my job because I'm going to start a new business and have
mm,
no business prospect. Have no, that idea just popped in their head that morning, and they walk in
mm,
and they quit their job, and they're happy,
mm,
and they're going on because they're going to start this great business, something they've never ever done before, but they're going to start it
mm,
today. So when
mm,
we talk about manic, these people are, and a lot of people that have manic behavior don't want treatment because it feels good to have this energy, and they can
mm,
sleep 2 hours and 2 or 3 hours and they get up and they're able to function the whole day with just that
mm,
little amount of sleep, and they can do that for days, but then it flips to the other
mm,
side. So when you have a
mm,
person that changes their mind back and forth a couple times a day, no, that's that's not bipolar.
mm,
So this usually lasts a few days and sometimes even weeks. And so with the depressive side of it as well, that can go on for weeks as well. So sometimes it's really hard to distinguish, are you really dealing with just depression? So that's why you do interviews and you talk to your patients and you're asking them these questions so that you can fully decide what it is that's going on. Also, when you have people that truly have bipolar disorder, A lot of times there is a family member or someone else, uh, grandparents or cousins or somebody who also have the same diagnosis. We're seeing it in
So
families.
there's a genetic component to it.
Yes, yes, yes. As
Hmm.
well as depression. Depression can have a genetic component
So
as
I want
well.
to interrupt you for a moment
Go ahead.
because I'm curious to know, with depression, I would imagine there's a significant enough change in a person that you would say, oh man, something's going on with that person. They're not getting out of bed. They're kind of, just kind of depressed, and all the things we kind of associate with depressed behaviors. But when we encounter individuals who are happy and seemingly living their best life, and they're on Instagram posting their new purchases, or oh, I just quit my job. You know, isn't it easy to just sort of see that as, oh, that person is just that's their personality. They're just a
That's it.
really upbeat
That's it.
person. Like, how do you? Yes, and I'm sure those individuals are able to easily sort of explain and justify their behaviors. How do you then know if you're someone, let's say, who's a family member or friend, whether that person is actually someone who needs treatment, or whether that's just an eccentric person who's very
So
lively?
the people who are the closest to that person will be able to tell because they'll notice that, yeah, yeah, you're happy and you're upbeat and you're buying all these things, but you just got an eviction notice. So they're noticing that there is a disconnect between the happiness and the behavior and what else is going on in that person's life. You
Mm-hmm.
just jumped up and you took a trip to California, but you have children at home that are underage and they don't have anybody to keep them. You've just left.
Mm-hmm.
You're just happy.
Mm.
So, um, and you're posting all these pictures and you're like, hello, who has your kids? And you're like, oh, but they're at the house. They're good. So people that are the
Yeah.
closest will be able to tell more than people who see them just at church or at work or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They won't be able to distinguish as well. They just think that this person really has it all together and they're able to do all these things and manage all of these things at one time, and so
Right.
many things are falling through the cracks.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is a very interesting point. I want to talk about some of the other disorders, but I want to, because you said that, I want to come now to, okay, so what about the family members? What about those individuals who are close to people who are showing signs of depression or showing signs of bipolar disorder? What should and can they do? What do you do when you're the person who's related to the one who's, acting in this way? What can you do? You know what I mean? Like,
Really and truly,
what resources do you have?
really and truly, in this society, there is a barrier
Mm,
because that person has to want to get treatment. So the thing to do, you would have to talk to them and explain to them what's going on because sometimes there's just a disconnect. They're just going, 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 going. And you're saying, hey, let's have a conversation. Something is a little off. I'm happy that you're happy, but look
mm,
at what's happening. You're about to get put out of your house. Your kids have no, and sometimes you can encourage them to go and get help. If they choose not to get help, your hands are tied.
mm,
Unless the person creates a scenario that brings harm to themselves or to others. Now, if they're doing things that are causing them to be at danger, then if they choose not to, then you can have them what we call probated. And that means you go in, you talk to a lawyer, I mean a judge, lawyer, tell them what's going on with the patient, and they can have them involuntarily admitted for evaluation. Um, the best resource if you don't have a provider, a psychiatric provider already, um, seeing that patient. I would start at the wellness center, the community mental health center. It's funded by the state as well as the county area where you are, and they will give you guidance as to what you can do and how you can do it. They'll give you kind of like legwork to say, okay, we can start here. But the
Mm,
key is to, if you can talk to them and get them to understand that
mm,
there's something going on and they go for help. Years ago, you had people doing things um, that were malicious. So if there was a family dispute, someone died, we had a lot of money left over, whatever. I don't want you to have any. Then I could
mm,
say they're crazy. Have you committed? And I get all the money. So
mm,
there's legislation now to prevent that from happening, but it went to the extent where a person that is sick is in control of their psychiatric care. And
mm.
so that's not always good, but unless they're a harm to themselves or someone else, your hands are really tied, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeah, I know I've experienced some of these things that you're talking about with
Yes.
family members, and I've seen others who have family members that have experienced similar things.
Yes.
And yeah, that is the challenge because you really are limited. And you know, you talk about, oh, you sit down and have a conversation with that person.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that sounds good in theory, but
Yes, yes,
those
yes.
people, like you said, they feel good. They think they've got it all together. I don't know that they're really that receptive typically to that conversation. And then, you know, if you're not living in the home with that individual, you know, I think
Right.
it's really easy for them to say, "Oh, well, you know, you don't know everything that's going on. I've got this under
Right.
control. You're on the outside looking in. Just relax. I'm good." You know, so I imagine that can be really,
It can be
really a
challenging.
challenge.
But I
Yeah.
have actually had patients that come to me that will come in and say, well, my family asked me to come and see you, but there's nothing wrong with me. And I say, well, okay. I said, well, let's just have a conversation. And let's talk
Um,
about why they think that something is wrong with you. I'm not saying why something is wrong. Why do they think that something is wrong with you? And usually when
mhm,
they sit down and talk with me and we have that conversation, and go into
mhm,
things a little more in depth, and then I pull out and say, okay, well, this is what they're seeing, and and then I engage them. What are you seeing in this area? And so
mhm,
sometimes you're able to get through, and they'll do it just so you'll shut up. I'll go and see
mm,
someone, and but if you
mm.
can't get them to, then you better start praying that the Holy Spirit will move them to see somebody.
Well,
You know,
I guess we
let's,
should be
let's
praying all the while.
all along. But do some fasting with
Anyway,
this one. Do some fasting in that area. You know, there's a scripture that
mercy.
says in Proverbs 21, it says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord as the rivers of water. He turns it whatever way they will. So you're like, God, please turn his heart so he'll go get some help, you know. So
Right, right. Wow.
yes,
Yeah, that's tough. Are there resources for family members anywhere that you know of, at least locally, those of us who are watching here in Huntsville, such as support groups and those types of things? Are there those types of things available?
absolutely. So the resource that you gave out, the NAMI,
Okay,
it is a it is for family members as well. And they
okay,
have a lot of resources. That's a great place to start to look
great.
for the resources to help with
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I want to jump back to depression just for a second, because
Yeah.
not everybody that is depressed walks around with their head hung down and looking sad and down. You know, we see people, we see our girlfriends, we see family
Mm-hmm.
members, and we say, hey, how you doing? But we're really not even stopping to
Mm-hmm.
get an answer because we're expecting I'm doing good and we're going on to the next thing. But what if you say, hey girl, how are you doing? And they say, I'm not having a good day. You're like, hold
Mm-hmm.
up, wait a minute. I wasn't expecting to hear that. Then what do you have to shift
Right.
gears? You know, so most people will not let you know that they're, unless you're really, really up close and personal with them. A lot of people will not let you know that they're going through depression. They struggle
Mm-hmm.
during the day. You're seeing people at church, at work, at school, at the grocery store who have struggled to get out of bed. They put on this face and they come out and they're saying,
Mm.
you're saying, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. I'm good. How are you? And by the time they get home, so much energy has been expended to get through that day with no one knowing they're depressed. They're just wiped out.
Mm. Mm.
They're just wiped out.
Mm.
So having that contact with people that you can really be real with, people that you can say, I'm not having a good day, or,
Mm.
things are not well with me. Being able to have that real conversation, because a lot of people, especially African American women, suffer in silence,
Oh
because
yeah.
this is what we have to do. It's
Yeah.
just my lot that I am now single after this divorce, and I have these children,
Mm.
and I've got to work to provide, and I don't have time for me, but I have to keep going to make sure everybody else is okay. And
Mm.
who's concerned about me? You don't even have
Yeah.
time to be concerned about you. So that creating this community that you're doing, or that you've done in the past 2 years, where you have resources and you have that accountability, where you can really come and be real and
Mm.
say, I'm not good. That is really what is needed in our community.
Yeah. 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 And what I hear you saying is that we need to slow down when we interact with one another, when we see each other at church, when we see each other in passing in the grocery store.
Yes,
Slow down, right? Like I am guilty of scooting on past. Hey, girl, how you doing? All right, and I keep it moving. But maybe
that's
that
it.
is not what we need to do, but rather, hey, like literally, how are you?
That's
What's
it.
been going on in your life? Like, take a moment. Yeah, that's something that I hear you saying to me. Like my conscience is pricked.
That's it.
Because you're right. I mean, who's gonna walk around with a billboard saying, "Hey, I'm depressed. Talk to me."
That's it.
Nobody.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So
Huh. Okay. Well, yeah. So good information for us to keep in mind, those who are watching. Let's really be one another's keeper. Hey Girl
absolutely.
absolutely was created for this kind of conversation, for this kind of intentionality, to remind us to look out for one another and be here for one another. You mentioned a couple of other disorders that I want to touch on briefly before we have to say goodbye. And I know that anxiety is one that you mentioned at the beginning, and I
Yes.
think that that is certainly one that I've heard a lot, mentioned quite a lot, particularly in these last couple of years as
Yes.
we've been dealing with COVID and so much hardship in our society and in our personal lives as well. Talk to us a little bit about what anxiety is, how it manifests, and what options there are for those of us who may be dealing with it.
Ironically, depression and anxiety kind of hang out together. Usually, I would say about 80 to 90% of people who have depression also have anxiety. You can't have one without the other, but they're usually
Hmm.
bosom buddies. So with the
Hmm.
anxiety, there's several levels of anxiety. You can have social anxiety. There are people who really have social anxiety that when they step into a room or at church or at work or whatever, their palms start to sweat and their heart
Hmm.
starts racing, and they just a fear comes over them, and it's really a struggle for them to even have a decent conversation,
Hmm.
because all of these things are going on at the same time. And then you can have anxiety, the just underlying anxiety, which gives you this anxiety. You feel this anxiousness, you feel this fear, worrying. You have people
Hmm.
that are constantly worrying about things. They may see that their child is not having a good day. And they'll take that and say, "Oh my gosh, she's gonna kill herself. She's so sad." And it could just be the child's stomach hurts, and they're just
Hmm.
not feeling good that day. But they're worrying, and the least little thing turns into a whole scenario, into the
Hmm.
end to the world. So they're constantly worrying. When they get in the bed at night, they can't shut their mind off. Their thoughts are going through their head so fast. They're worried about the next day. Who's going to say something to them? What it's going to be like at work next week, next month, next year.
Mm,
So that constant worry and those racing thoughts,
mm,
irritability. They're
mm,
just irritable. The least little thing just really upsets them so badly. Something small like leaving a light on can cause
mm,
them to just flip out because that
mm,
anxiety is just there. So all of these things, the worry, the irritability, the racing thoughts, um, muscle tension in the neck and shoulders, all of these things are signs of anxiety that we're looking at for a patient. So treatment for anxiety, there are some cognitive behavioral training that can be done with your therapist that can help you
mm,
to better manage anxiety. If that does not work, we can always add in an antidepressant, and
mm,
that works to decrease and the anxiety to where it is a manageable level. And there are levels of anxiety where we say the patient is just so fearful that they will not leave their homes. And
mhm.
I've seen several of those be exacerbated with COVID. There are some
Yeah,
patients that I had to just revert to doing phone visits with because they were not coming out of that house.
couldn't leave the house. Yeah.
Could not
Well,
leave
and
the
then
house.
all of us, we were being bombarded with all the bad news every day. And so I imagine that just
Yes, yes, yes,
exacerbates that
yes,
fear of what's possible.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so
And
it sounds to me like on one hand, you want to say to individuals who are, expecting the worst, assuming the worst, preparing for the worst, all the time, just to tell them as friends and loved ones, hey, calm down, don't worry, don't, that's
yes,
probably not going to happen. But is that unrealistic to say, oh, just don't think about those things, for a person who's experiencing anxiety, for someone to just tell them, oh, don't think that way or don't think about that. Does that help at all or does that actually do more harm than
no, it
good?
doesn't help because they're saying to myself, it's real. This is really happening. So
Yeah.
you can tell the person, you can say, wow, that sounds like a lot to have to carry and deal with. Why don't you go and talk with someone about that and see if you can get some help? Because that's you have a lot on you. So if you can encourage
Mm,
them to go and seek help, then they can, because they can receive it better from them than they can from you. Because
yeah.
sometimes when we say things and we really mean well, we
Mm-hmm.
really mean well. I remember when my son died, people would people say, well, we're gonna see him in when Jesus comes again. Yeah, I want to see him when Jesus comes again. I know that. That's true. I believe that. I wholeheartedly
Yeah.
believe that. But right now, I miss my child. So
Yeah.
there are some times when we are meaning well. We
Mm-hmm.
really mean well, but we just don't know the right words to say. And it's okay
Right.
to say, you know what, I really wished I knew what to say, but I don't. So if there's any way, I wish you would just go and talk with someone that can help you better than I can. Just
Oh,
push them
yeah.
towards therapy, encourage them for
Mm-hmm.
therapy. And so and that's something that we really need to look at. Sometimes, y'all, we just need to shut up. If
Mm,
we don't know what we're
mm-hmm.
talking about, if we have not experienced that, if we're not in that area, we can offer prayer, we can say, I love you, but please go talk with someone that can help you
Yeah.
in this area.
And what I also hear you saying too is to affirm the emotions that a
Yes,
person is having, not to
real.
dismiss them and say, "Oh, you shouldn't think that way," or "You should," but rather say,
Yes.
"Oh man, that must make you really fearful or anxious." Yeah, and that way the person knows that you're recognizing what they're experiencing. Because I
Yeah.
can imagine if I'm having a panic attack and you're telling me not to have a panic attack, I'm like, clearly you don't understand what this feels like
No,
for
wait a
you to
minute,
just
hold
be
on.
telling me to just stop.
Yes. Yes, yes. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? Telling me that
Right.
I can't breathe. My
Right.
chest is hurting. I need to go to the ER.
Right.
But
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
validate that that is what they're feeling. This is what you're feeling.
Hmm.
Okay, I understand. And not, don't say I understand. Just say that
Uh,
must be difficult for you.
right.
Man, that's a lot. And then proceed to
Yeah.
encourage them to go and get help.
I
To
really
go and get
appreciate you giving us some of that language to use and not to use. Maybe we should put this on a
absolutely.
handout. Like what to say and what not to say to
Yes.
someone who's having an
Yes.
anxiety moment, or even
Exactly.
someone who has suffered loss, as you said,
Hmm.
because I've often been in a situation where I'm like, oh, I want to encourage this person, but I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I feel
Right.
like I should say something. And then sometimes I know I have been guilty of this and maybe others have as well, because you don't want to say the wrong thing, you just stay away. And I'm
Right.
imagining that that's not helpful because the person still
That's
needs you to needs to know that you're there. So yeah, Pinky, we're gonna talk after this about how we can put a little handout together that we can
okay.
share with some of the language that
Yes.
we as lay people can use with one another so we can build our
Correct.
sisters up, so we can help one another encourage, but yet not do more harm than good in our effort to help
Absolutely.
by using the wrong words.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been so helpful, and I knew that the time would go by too fast for us to get to all the things that we really could talk about around this subject. But I wanted to at least get it started. I thank you so much for what you've shared already. And I'm wondering, as we close out, first of all, let me ask if you have other resources or things that you want to point us to. And then, secondly, I want to know if you'd be willing for us to do a part two of this conversation in the very near future so that we
Yes.
can maybe touch on some of the other things that we weren't able to get to today.
Yes. Yes. We definitely need to do a part two. We definitely need to do a part two. Not a problem at all. There is a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Okay.
And that is a book that talks about trauma that we may not have dealt with from childhood or trauma that we just kind of, we're taught to just, put on your big girl pants and just keep going. And
Yeah.
that's what we do. We just keep moving
Hmm.
forward. So with that, we have to just look to see this is a good resource for us. And so that's one. And another one is called The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health.
All
We've
right.
got to get real with this in our community. We don't seek help like we should. And we
Yeah.
have more trauma than
Oh,
probably any other group, I would say.
oh,
But
seriously.
we do not encourage each other to seek the help we need to. But it's time that we talk
Mm,
about it and we do it so that we can be better and live better lives and be more productive.
awesome. I'm going to get both of these books. And I think that everyone who is of African American descent should as well, because you're right. It is a real problem in our community. There's a stigma around mental health. We are supposed to be
Yes,
strong black men and strong black women,
that's
and
it.
yet our whole existence and history is rooted in brokenness and trauma. So
Yes.
why wouldn't we need this support and this help in this area that we're so unwilling to get? So thank you for that. Thank you for those resources. We'll put the information in the chat as well so that you all can get access to it. And yes, we are going to talk after this, Pinky, about putting together a resource and also setting up the next time for us to talk again. And so I just
Sounds
thank you
good.
again for this. It was excellent information. It's so
Not
helpful.
a
And I
problem.
really, really appreciate you.
You're so welcome, Kim, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to go to our scripture now, which comes from Isaiah 26, verse 3. And it says, "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. And this verse to me is relevant to this conversation because, as Pinky said, some of these things are so hard to deal with that all we can do is pray. And I would say, period, all we can do is pray and then ask God to guide us to those resources that will best help us, that He has put in place for us. And indeed, He's the one who created us and understands us better than we can understand ourselves. So let's not discount the power of God to assist us in this area in particular. And as African Americans, let's not deny the help that we all need. Not just as African Americans, but all of us, as Pinky said, should be getting therapy regularly just to deal with the day-to-day, but especially if we or someone we know is dealing with mental illness. Guys, we have come to the end of the 106th episode of Hey Girl, and I've mentioned in the last couple of weeks that we have some changes coming, and I want to let you know about a very important change that is about to go into place. So we will end today with perhaps our last, or at least our last for some time, live Facebook episode of Hey Girl, because there's just been a lot going on. In the last couple of months, the world has opened up again, and life has gotten busy, and you guys are all on the run, and I thought it might be good to make Hey Girl accessible to you as you're on the move. So we're going to be transitioning from the Facebook Live to an audio podcast format. We are not going away. We are still going to continue with these conversations. There's just too much more to talk about, but we're going to take a little time off from the producing the live episodes to create that audio version that you'll be able to take on the go. What I need all of you to do is to continue to follow, and share the Instagram, the Facebook, certainly sign up for the newsletter. I will keep you posted on those changes that will be going into place in the fall. And I definitely want you to stay tuned in. Continue to support the Hey Girl store. We have new products in the store for the summer, some cute t-shirts with words and verbiage on them that will encourage you. As you know, that is what Hey Girl is all about. It's about uplifting one another, keeping us encouraged and accountable, and reminding each of us that we are not alone. We don't have to handle this life all by ourselves. So I just wanted to let you know that we are changing over to a new format. The Facebook Live is going away, or at least we'll just do Facebook Lives, maybe on occasion for special occasions, but we will be consistently available in the audio podcast version. So I hope you'll stick with us. I have enjoyed the last 2 years so much, spending time with you, and I thank you all so much for supporting us. As I said, I hope that you will continue to do so. And in the meantime, be well, be blessed, have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I know there's lots of celebrations going on, so enjoy. God bless, and I will see you soon.